Now let's hear from Jim Iuorio. He has been a trader for 38 years. He's a co-host of the podcast, The Future's Edge, and he works at the Chicago Board of Trade. And so let's start with our 7 questions, Jim. Number 1, is the tariff tantrum overdone? Are investors worried too much?
Well, by the way, it's market's job to almost overdo everything. It's a pendulum swing and it swings back and forth. Is the tariff tantrum overdone? I think the answer to that is yes. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the selling could be forcing people to de-risk, because a lot of times you kind of hand the torch off. The reason that we started breaking may have well been the tariff tantrum, but then all of a sudden people are like, well, it's been 2 years of excessive gains in the stock market. Perhaps I have too many stocks. So the next couple legs of a corrective phase could happen even if the tariff tantrum is overdone. Now, back to the tariffs. I think the tariff, there's no more discussion about the tariffs. There is one thing left. The market has singularly focused on China versus the United States. This is it's like an old Western, and there's been 200 people shot in the gunfight, but the last scene is the United States on one side and China on the other. I think we've come to that point right now. And the question becomes who blinks. I still think China will blink, but if they don't, then it'll take years to reroute these supply chains through these other countries. But either way, we are honing in on some sort of clarity on what the ultimate goal is. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Now, second question. Where do we go from here? Bungee jump back up, or more pain to come, or Trump blinks and retreats?
Okay, so I do think, and I just started buying some things on Friday, and I know that Monday was a kind of a volatile day as well too. But I think if you have a time horizon that's 2 to 3 years at a minimum, then this becomes, and this is again not a recommendation. I don't know the depths of your pockets or your risk tolerance. For me, if I have a 2 to 3 year time horizon on a portfolio, I've started to add. I think this is a fairly fair correction so far. 27% in the Nasdaq seems sufficient. I think there could be another leg down, and I haven't seen a technical setup to buy it yet, but I am much, much less worried than I was at the first 3 months this year. And I know that sounds kind of weird. I've been screaming for the whole year that if you thought 2025 was going to be a year without hiccups and potholes, you were fooling yourself. And it doesn't matter if you thought we were going from a bad economic system to a good one. It's the transition at the pace of which we take that path that's going to disrupt markets. And it certainly did. I think we're going to a better way, but I think the ride is going to be bumpy. So I am starting to look more from the long side.
Okay. Question 3. The Magnificent 7 stocks are down 15 and 20%. Time to buy them now.
Okay, so I did buy, and again, I will go back to my whatever your timeframes are. If you are a trader and if you are looking at the swing trader within the next couple of months, I'm not so sure the technical setups support that. If you are someone who plans on being in for the long haul, some of these seem to be very good buy. I bought what I call the Nancy Pelosi stock on Friday. By the way, my license is for futures. I will say that Nancy Pelosi's done a great job with NVIDIA, and I did add some of that stock. That is not advice, and I plan on adding more of that because I think getting that at down 30%. Everybody says a month ago, man, if NVIDIA ever traded off 25-30%, I'd buy it with both hands. But then as soon as it does trade off 25 or 30%, seems like people are sitting on their hands. So I actually did get off the sideline and bought some, like Warren Buffett always says. And I'm not the hugest Warren Buffett fan. I think he's hypocritical in many ways. But one thing he says that I always love: when everyone else is panicky, you should get greedy.
Excellent. I also bought some NVIDIA yesterday, in fact, and even some MicroStrategy. And even a little bit of GBTC, the Bitcoin play with the.
I like it. I like all of it. Yeah.
Okay. Question number 4. Any particular sectors or stocks you'd buy here now?
Okay. So I'm glad you brought this up because there is one sector that I love quite a bit, and that's metals and commodities. And I've been banging that drum for a couple of years now. And today is an interesting day, and we're taping on Wednesday, the 9th. So 10-year yields have gone from 3.75% to 4.3%. I might be getting some of those numbers wrong, but I'm close enough in a very, very short amount of time. This has the market worried, and they're worried that perhaps there's some foreign agent that might be selling bonds, could be China. It doesn't matter who's selling bonds and who's driving yields up. What does matter is this: we're at the beginning of starting to talk about again the potential for, at some point, and this talk is in its infant stages, of some point the Federal Reserve perhaps coming back in and supporting the bond market, supporting the 10-year market through their quantitative easing program. If this happens, gold, silver, copper, all the things, because it's going to be inflationary, it's going to hurt the dollar, those things are going to do exceedingly well in that environment. And that's all part of my dollar hedge portfolio, which essentially is every time they do something stupid regarding their stewardship of the dollar, I buy more of these things. And Bitcoin's in it too. You mentioned Bitcoin. I have Bitcoin as well, despite the fact that it's taken on the chin. I have real estate and I have all those metals groups.
Good. Longer term, Jim, will the tariffs work? Manufacturing come back?
I'm going to say yes. I'm not 100% clear on that answer. I'm putting that as a 70-30. I think yes. I think the notion that we want fairness in trade is perfectly reasonable. I think the notion of trying to get that fairness in trade in 2 years' time is very, very aggressive, but he only has 2 years' time in his mind. And that's the system is set up as such. If he doesn't have something positive in place and we're starting to reap the benefits of it by the midterm elections in 2026, he could conceivably lose and lose his majority in both houses. I think he knows full well that this plan would work beautifully and swimmingly if we took 5 to 6 years to implement it, but we don't have 5 to 6 years. And he's going to try to do it in 2. I think there is a 70% chance that he threads the needle and it works.
Question number 6. Are we definitely heading into recession? If so, how deep?
So this is a really interesting one because I think we're in recession already, and I don't think it's any reason to dig yourself a bunker and go hide in it. So here's what I'm basing it on. Over the last 2 years, the top 10% of wealth holders, asset holders in this country, drove 50% of the consumer spending. That is highly unusual. Usually it goes at about 35%. So 2 straight years where the asset, and this is no surprise to guys like you and I, because we saw the K-shaped recovery happen after the COVID stimulus in 2020 and 2021. The rich people had money and they were spending it. Well, now all of a sudden, if you're going to zap $7 trillion out of equity markets from that top 10% and you don't think there's going to be reverberations, I think that's silly as well. So I think we will see I think inflation's already toast because you can't have inflation. If Milton Friedman's right and inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon, well, then if you take $7 trillion out of the equation, there's less money to chase fewer goods. Inflation's done, but I do think we're in a recession. I don't think it's going to be any sort of massive in-depth recession. Those two that we saw in 01 and in 08 all were dependent on massive leverage built up on certain assets, one time in tech stocks, one time in houses, and not just leverage built up on the private equity and hedge fund side, but down to mom and pops. I didn't see that anywhere, and I don't think it's going to be this huge drag out recession.
Excellent answer. That's 7 trillion. That's how much equity stocks are down this past week or so, or?
Yeah, give or take. They're down 5
That's
trillion
on a base
in 2 days.
of what before the decline? That's on a base of how much in stocks?
I cannot remember. I think there was about 60 trillion of value in stocks. And we took out, in total, I think we've taken out closer to 10 to 12 trillion. I just meant in the last week, the 7 trillion. But again, those are thumbnail numbers, but they're not that far off.
Right. And indeed, it's not a devastating decline when we're coming down from all-time highs.
Certainly isn't. And everybody acts like the sky's falling. If you turn on legacy media, which by the way, and this isn't, it's supposed to be a pat on the back for guys like you and I who are forming an alternative to legacy media. But if you turn on those stations today, it is absurd how they're trying to talk the market into an absolute destructive decline. They want to be right so badly. I know I got you going right here. I'm going to let you go, right?
That is perfect because that leads into my next question. Thomas Lee Partners, Fund Strat on X.
Tom Lee. Yeah.
That guy is, bullish at a time when others are afraid. And he came out this week with an extraordinary thing rarely ever heard on Wall Street, an apology, because he got the market call wrong. He really thought we'd power right through this. Instead, we had this rather, sharp decline. But he came out with a chart showing and raising this new doubt that I have, which is we cannot trust economic data, consumer sentiment surveys, hedge fund actions anymore as simply an economic and financial outlook that they have, because their outlook is now being skewed by their political bent and by the political divide. And Thomas Lee Partners posted a chart showing that, hedge funds, 85% are Democrat. The University of Michigan Consumer Sentiment Survey, something like 57% of respondents are Democrat, vastly overweighted. And if you're giving answers about your outlook, no wonder consumer sentiment might plunge. You, as a Democrat, might be hoping it plunges because you want to screw over President Trump.
There
Now,
is
what do you
no
think about this?
There is no question of that. And I can add quite a bit to it. I don't know if you saw, I did a Twitter poll because 2 days ago, I spoke to a wealth management guy who said he's getting calls, and those calls are 50-50 split of people who want to de-risk versus people who want to add risk. And guess what the commonality is with each side? It is political. So then I put out on Twitter about, because a ton of wealth managers I'm in contact with on Twitter, hundreds and hundreds of them. I said, are you guys seeing that as well? Within the first 12 hours, I got like 90 responses on Twitter, almost all of them saying, oh, we're seeing this completely. And the funny thing is because someone came and said, wait, your buddy who's a wealth manager asks people what their political affiliation is. Like, no, the people who are selling because of Donald Trump, they got a tattoo that says I'm selling because of Donald Trump. They want to tell it to people who are passing them on the streets that they're selling it because of Donald Trump. They're so proud of it, and they want things to collapse.
It's as if they are keying Teslas. They're so proud to
Exactly.
sell stocks in the market.
And they're willing to get some sort of $1,000 fine for keying a Tesla because they want to be part of some movement. This psychologically, this is weird shit that, oh, sorry about that. This is weird, and I cannot understand why this is happening, but it is certainly happening. It's not our job to understand why, just know that it is. There is a lot of people that want destruction right now so they can say, yeah, I might not, can't afford the car payments anymore of my car, but I was right. Okay, you're right, but you're not.
Yeah. And ultimately, though, if their sentiment about the economic outlook is wrong because they are biased and they're hoping for destruction, it does present a buying opportunity for the others who have the faith and the appetite for risk and who are willing to go in and try to catch that falling knife.
Yes, that is most likely, but it's not exclusively what could happen, because it is a lot of emotion is built into markets as it is. And if that wave crests and they can convince the rest of the world that things are really going into the toilet, it could have another leg down in equity markets. Eventually, it presents an excellent buying opportunity, but to dismiss it as just 100% morons, just the clowns trying to entertain, that's not right either, because they could have enough power to swing emotion. I don't think they will, but it's something we need to worry about.
Okay. Let's now move beyond the markets maybe and go a little broader to what else has been bugging you lately, Jim. I mean, I'll start us off with this observation. I think the Democrats have really gone crazy. They're delusional. Their leaders have been preaching such fear and dire predictions for so long that the rank and file seem to believe it. And you see these protests, video on X, of people, grown adults who are just mad, just crazy with hatred. And I had kind of thought maybe the Democrats would start to dial some of that back, but it seems to be getting fiercer rather than calmer.
And it felt in the first couple months, it felt like it was dialing back. And then it changed completely. I constantly put out this plea, and people think I'm just trying to stir the pot, which is not beneath me. I do occasionally try to stir the pot, but I genuinely want to know. I want some intelligent, articulated discussion about what is it exactly you hate about Elon Musk? What is it exactly you hate about Donald Trump? When you pressure them on Elon Musk, they'll be like, he took all these government subsidies and now he's trying to pull them away. Say, okay, but you didn't hate them when he was taking the government subsidies, and the left loved him for building the best electronic car. You only started hating him when basically the glowing box in your living room told you to start hating him. It's kind of the same thing as the Ukraine flag. Like, what in the hell happens? How is there a mass email that goes out that says, you guys all take pictures of yourself with masks on and then run a picture of the Ukraine flag on your Twitter bio? This is crazy. And it is about emotion versus logic and brain. The left, they know their people, and a lot of times they're younger people. And by the way, okay, this is, I don't know if I can even say this, cancel it if you have to. I am the father of two highly intelligent and highly motivated young ladies. I am the husband of a wife who was an attorney for 35 years and an excellent one. One of the things I like about women the most is they are in tune with their emotions better. They're more emotional creatures than some of the men are. And some of these women are thinking with their emotions and not with their logical brain. Thomas Sowell always says you can characterize the last 50 years by things that worked being replaced by things that sound good. Things that sound good appeal to people's emotions. This is the divide right now. Is they're thinking emotionally. They want everybody to have money and a job and minimum wage, and they cannot think about the steps that need to be taken to achieve those goals. Because I always argue that we all want the same goals. We just have much, much different paths to get there. And the problem I see is that our paths have been proven right throughout history, and their paths have been proven wrong, yet they still adhere to them like grim death.
There's a lot there to unpack. While I like your observations there, but now that you brought up women, I just want to say I saw a chart on X the other day, and it just looked at political spectrum by age, sex, race, cohorts. And it ended up showing that white women, college educated, were by far the most liberal, just unblindingly blinded, brainwashed liberal group in the American population. Then you look at this Amy Coney Barrett, Supreme Court Justice, conservative appointed by Trump, who just sided with the three other women on the court who are the libs in saying, oh gosh, we should be able to stop the president from deporting criminal Venezuelan gang members. I mean, just an amazing thing. And then I realized, oh yeah, because she's part of that white college educated women cohort. And the reason they are so pro liberal agenda, LGBTQ, pro immigration is because they put themselves in a similarly privileged, oppressed class because they're women. Never mind that white women have income levels, education levels, jobs, pay, etc., vastly higher than most of the other groups except for white men. They have been able to portray themselves as a minority, as an oppressed group that needs special protection. And that special protection is now being threatened by the Trump backlash against DEI, et cetera. What do you say?
And I agree. By the way, I'd like to underscore a couple things here. Like I said, men and women are different. By the way, oddly, that's a big political thing too. The men and women are different. And men can't become women, but that's not what we're talking about right here. And women are just wonderful at so many things. I'm in awe of many of the things they do. But I will say that their sense of emotion, their sense of guilt is oftentimes so finely honed that it leads, not oftentimes, seldom, but occasionally leads them to making the wrong decisions. This is one of those times, which, by the way, every woman in my life, including all of my best friends, are high-powered women who we have discussions like this all the time, and we're fine with it. So if anyone wants to hate me and think that I'm anti-woman, that's fine. I'm just saying in this particular instance, over emotion, over sense of guilt. Like what is white privilege even supposed to mean? I don't understand. I did not feel privileged growing up in the 1970s with 11 people living in one home. And I'm partially African-American. I mean, my daughter did a DNA test, which I told her not to because it's the government taking your data, by the way. I'll guarantee you that. But I am. Southern Italians oftentimes are. So like, what are you talking about? I don't feel any privilege at all. And even if I did, I don't care. We're not all in this together. As Edwin von Mises always says, a man oftentimes does better for society by starting out to do better for himself than if he starts out to do better for society. And that's what I've always tried to live by. I've built businesses. I employ a crap ton of people, not just at the restaurant, in the finance business, in the trading business. I've employed a lot of people for a long time. For me to, if anyone suggests that I should feel guilt, no, it's just not going to happen. Sorry.
I've always lamented this move toward stakeholder capitalism. It's not just your investors that you have to reward. It's your employees and community members and oppressed groups of society. And the fact is, instead, that first thing you said about Mises, or whatever that economist's name is that, yeah, if you instead go with a profit motive and returns, you end up creating a good service or product to earn that money. And that motive alone makes you rich. And then when you're rich, you can decide what you want to fund and what stakeholders you want to help out instead of giving your money to a company that does it.
Right. We pay all our restaurant employees significantly more than the going rates. Do you think we do it to be kind? Hell no, we don't do it to be kind. We do it to not have turnover. We have a good business going, and we are smart enough to know that our business will continue provided we have a staff that loves us and is loyal and is making more money than they could somewhere else. This is the beautiful thing. Sometimes these socialists point out to the great story about Henry Ford deciding that he was going to pay his people enough to be able to afford Ford cars. You remember the story, right? It wasn't actually really Henry Ford. It was his right-hand guy, but it's often attributed to Henry Ford.
Same diff.
Yeah. And what'd you say? You know the guy?
Same difference.
Yeah, same difference. So, but anyway, so even guys like Michael Moore, I saw him in an interview once talking about how that was just this perfect example of socialism. Are you nuts? That is the most capitalistic thing I've ever heard. A businessman made the decision that he should pay his people enough to be customers of the product that he and they sell, and then they can go out and be ambassadors of said product. That's capitalism at its beautiful best.
It sure is. And then you take a company like Tesla, which is being beaten up, its stock and literally the cars and car lots where it sells, and they're getting torched. And all of this, when it's a wonderful symbol of capitalism, it's a wonderful product. It's the first electric car ever that was every bit as good as or better than, a gas-powered car. And it's under attack somehow. We just
really shows
upside down bizarre times.
Yeah, it really shows the level of hypocrisy that certain pockets of the left has, particularly the environmental idiots, which I'll often argue. And this is, by the way, this is not just the first example of how they're not really environmentalists and they just kind of are more rabble rousers. We've known nuclear power is the solution for 30 years. Was there some missteps along the way? Of course there was, but there is literally the perfect supply of clean energy that they fight at every turn. Why do they fight it? Are they worried about reactor meltdowns? No, they're worried about the fact that their stupid niche goes away and they don't have anything to fight against anymore.
For solar and all that wind stuff.
Exactly. And they push for those things that aren't really the solution, and they are mathematically not really the solution. And they push for those anyway, knowing that they can never solve this problem. And then they can be an activist their whole life.
Man, this is smart stuff. I just love this. Okay, so for the final lap around here, let's go to Elon Musk and Doge. Our government takes in about $5 trillion a year in taxes, but it spends $2 trillion more than that, $7 trillion a year, which it started doing in COVID and kept up even after COVID ended. And Elon really wants to cut that spend from 7 to 6, cut it by 14%. That would cut the deficit, the annual amount we overspend, in half to only $1 trillion from 2 only, being it's still a huge number. Will Elon get there?
No, he won't. It is not uncommon for new administrations, politicians to set goals. I don't even need him to get there. I just need him to get in that direction of that. I need him to create a new culture in this government. They were just talk about the amount furniture that was spent on furniture in the different federal government. $1 billion
or something on furniture when no one's at work.
No one's at work. $700,000 to redo one office space and something. I think it was the SEC. So I want him to bring on a culture, a new culture, that where federal governments look at each other cross-eyed if someone takes home a stapler. That shouldn't even be happening. The fact that people are protesting him, going after the USAID thing. I was in a debate with some guy who runs a liberal think tank. I can't remember who he was, but I said, and $20 million to study non-binary gophers in Madagascar. And he goes, wait, that wasn't a real thing. I said, no, it wasn't a real thing. But the fact that you even had to ask that question makes how ridiculous the money that we spend is. The only way we ever stop this, and Ronald Reagan said, you have to choke the beast. You have to take the money out of government. I have argued for 20 years that increased deficits and increased debt is because the government collects too much money in revenue, not too little. And the more they collect, the more abuse and fraud has happened. And this has gone on for decades and decades. And the only way to stop it is to actually stand up and stop it. Will they have luck? I don't know. You see the pushback they get. Half of the people right now are saying they want to study non-binary gophers in Madagascar. They want $20 million to go for that, apparently, or else why would they be lining up at these protests?
Just incredible. These protests, which some of them lately, it's a whole bunch of gray heads, a bunch of old retirees, who clearly are getting paid to board the bus and get off it. And
I want in. Where do I sign up? I want to be paid.
Right. The clock strikes 3 o'clock and they're on the National Mall in Washington. And then they all board the buses and leave. And I mean, as if your passion all just ran out together at the same time. Wow, that's some grassroots.
And the
Well,
by
okay,
the way,
this
I'll add something to that too, real quick, Dennis. When I remember Charlottesville in Virginia when Trump first took office, and I'm like looking at the pictures of it and going, well, they're all dressed the same, all the same torches and flags. What the hell is going on here? These are being funded. They've always been funded. They're probably being funded by Act Blue. And if someone funds a protest and that fund and protest gets out of hand, there should be civil and criminal charges filed against the protesters of it. Sorry,
yeah.
I mean of the
But
funders of it.
Elon Musk has been vowing on X publicly that he will end up taking action against the groups organizing. There's been five of them that he's named, and that their leaders will end up in jail. At the very least, I hope the leaders end up being called to task and held accountable for what
Amen.
they're doing. Yeah.
Amen.
All
Yeah.
right, Jim Iuorio, man, you know what, folks out there, I hate doing this, sending you to a podcast that's smarter than mine. But if you want to hear more of this from
True.
Jim and his 38 years of experience on Wall Street, you got to tune into the Futures Edge because, man, this guy's so good. Thanks a lot for coming on What's Bugging Me.
Thank you, Dennis. I love being here. I love the discussion with you.